Hello there and welcome to my guide for painting the Orc fleshbusters from Puppets of War. They're some ghost-busting orcs, or human-busting orcs, and they look absolutely fantastic. As you can see, the very first thing I've done is spray them all white with some matte white spray from Colourforge. I thought I'd get the ghosts out of the way first, so for the one without the flames, I'm going to paint him a nice warpstone green, to which I'll then use some Beltan green to add some shading. And while that dries, I'll start painting the other ghost. The other ghost I'm going to paint as a more traditional squig colour, so I'm going to use some Mephiston red for the base coat. And then for the wash, I'm going to use some Carroburg crimson. Once the wash has dried, I'll then do a dry brush with Warpstone Glow on the green one, followed by a 50-50 mix of Warpstone Glow and Moot Green for the next highlight. Then Moot Green just by itself for the next dry brush. And then a final 50-50 mix of Moot Green and Matte White just for the ever so slightest of dry brushes at the end. Then we're going to move on to the red squig, and for him we're going to dry brush him with some Evil Sunz Scarlet. This will be followed by Wild Rider Red. Then it's Troll Slayer Orange, and we're going to focus mostly on the flames, but we'll also do the front of his face as well, just to brighten that up a little bit. Then it's some Fire Dragon Bright. Again, this is just on the flames, because we want to try and get those brightened up as much as possible. This will be followed by some Flashgitz Yellow. And we're still focusing just on the flames. And then finally a little bit of Dawn Yellow, and this is focused on the very tips of the flames. For the Orcs, we'll paint their jumpsuits with some Steel Legion Drab, which we'll then wash with some Army Painter Soft Tone. Once that wash is dried, I'm going to dry brush the area again with some Steel Legion Drab just to brighten everything up and avoid all those recesses. Then I'll give it a second dry brush with some Talon Sand. And a final dry brush with a 50-50 mix of Talon Sand and Flayed One Flesh. This dry brush is a far lighter dry brush, so try not to go too heavy. After that, I'll then use some Abaddon Black to paint any areas that are going to be black. This is going to be the boots, his gloves, and the piping leading to the burners. Once the black area is out of the way, I then moved on and started using some Iron Hand Steel to paint any areas that I felt should be steel. Once that was out of the way, I then moved on and used some Nuln Oil to paint all the areas we've just painted black and silver. Once our wash is dried, I then move back to the black, and I use some Corvus Black to start the highlighting process. And this was followed by a 50-50 mix of Corvus Black and Eshin Grey. The silvery metal was then highlighted with a 50-50 mix of Iron Hand Steel and Stormhost Silver. And then Stormhost Silver just by itself where the light would catch the objects. Next, I want to paint these straps and the bandages with some Deathworld Forest. And I'll paint the skin with some War Flesh. Then both the straps and the flesh will get washed with some Athonian Camo Shade. And while that wash dries, I'm going to start painting the logo on their arms with some Mephiston Red, which I'll wash with some Carroburg Crimson. I then went back to the straps and used a 50-50 mix of Deathworld Forest and Ogryn Camo, followed by a little highlight of Ogryn Camo on the corners. Before I start to work on the skin, I thought I'd do the inside of all their mouths, and for that I used some Pink Horror, which was given a wash with some Carroburg Crimson. While that dried, I then started to work on the skin with a 50-50 mix of War Flesh and Warboss Green, followed by Warboss Green just by itself. This is a very light coat because I don't want my guys to be too green. And then finally a 50-50 mix of Warboss Green and Skarsnik Green. I then use Mephiston Red to start highlighting their logo. But I also use this to paint the eyes of the Orks. And this was then highlighted with some Evil Sunz Scarlet, eyes and all. For the insides of the mouths, I relayered the pink horror just to brighten things up a little bit. And this was followed by a 50-50 mix of pink horror and pallid witch flesh. I then used some Screaming Bell to paint the tips of some of the Burnas. Morghast Bone to paint all of the teeth. And Dryad Bark to paint a couple of Orcs' hair. I then used some Agrax Earthshade watered down with a little bit of Lamia Medium for the teeth, the hair, and the front of the Burnas. And while that wash dries, we'll start to work on more of the finer details. So I'm going to use Avalanche Sunset to paint some of the lights, as well as the eyes on the two squig ghosts. In these areas will get washed with some Cassandora Yellow. For the goggles, I'm going to use some Warpstone Glow, followed by a 50-50 mix of Warpstone Glow and Mute Green for the first highlight. And the second is just Moot Green all by itself. For all of the white areas, I'm going to use some Grey Seer as a base coat. These areas include the badges and all of the dials on the proton packs. Next will be a 50-50 mix of Grey Seer and Matte White, followed by Matte White just by itself at the end. I'm then going to use some Mephiston Red to start painting in some danger areas on the dials, along with a few of the lights on the weapons. These areas will be highlighted with some Evil Sunz Scarlet. And then finally, Wild Rider Red. I'm then going to use Matte White to finish off the badges, as well as a tiny little dot on any areas of light or reflection. Then I'm going to use some Flashgitz Yellow to brighten up all those areas we painted yellow earlier. A 50-50 mix of Morghast Bone and Wraithbone will be used for the teeth. And this will be followed by Wraithbone just by itself on the very tips. I'm then going to break out the Iron Hand Steel again, just to fill in some of the minor details we missed on the straps. And I'll give those areas a very small wash with some Null Oil. The other hair I'm going to paint with some Corvus Black. And the glasses I'm going to paint with Macragge Blue. These will then get highlighted with a 50-50 mix of Macragge Blue and Calgar Blue, followed by a little bit of Calgar Blue just by itself. For the lenses, I'm just going to use a tiny bit of Corvus Black, and I'll add a couple of bits of Matte White just to add some reflection. Any brown hair will be dry brushed with some Gothor Brown. And then just out of camera shot, I'm going to be dry brushing the black hair with some Mechanica Standard Grey. And with that, once you've based them, that's these guys finished. I absolutely love them. They are from Puppets of War. They're absolutely phenomenal. They're some brilliant models. I wholly recommend that if you can, definitely get your hands on them. In total, to paint the lot, it took around about 12 hours, but it is a massive joy doing them. I had such a blast. I really do love these guys. I can't emphasize enough how much fun I think these guys are and just how brilliant they are. I recommend them to absolutely everybody. If you watched this video and followed up for a guide, I really do hope it helped, and I hope you enjoyed painting these guys as much as I did. And if you want to see more, just give the channel a subscribe, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you again so much, and goodbye for now.